Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. UberBear, and I'm joined by my other host...
Stu. MTG.
Welcome back, Stu MTG.
Thank you. Yes, being sick has been not very fun, but it's good to get back in the recording studio.
Absolutely. Hey, so we've got an interesting episode today we're going to talk about, but before we do that, we're going to go into an interesting little...
Riddle.
This
is a cool riddle, and it's from a movie. It's a classic 80s movie with David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly, and it has a really cool riddle in it. So Jennifer Connelly walks up to two doors. One gate leads to the castle.
Sarah!
And one leads to certain death. One of the doors always tells the truth, and the other door always lies.
Dum, dum, dum.
Dum, dum, dum. So how does Sarah get through this puzzle? Well, she asks one of the doors...
The blue door.
Would this door tell me that it would lead me to the castle? And the door responds with a simple yes. To which Sarah concludes that, well then, the other door must lead to the castle, and this door leads to certain death, because one of them always lies, and one of them always tells the truth.
So if you're really confused right now...
Which you should be.
Yeah, as you should be. You need to watch The Labyrinth. It's an amazing Jim Henson
Classic.
film. Classic movie. But it kind of really ties into what we're going to talk about today, and it's going to be...
Choices with spells. Cards that give more than one choice.
Cards that give choices. Perhaps too many choices? Are they elegant or are they convoluted? But before we do that, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our refreshment of the pod. Stu, what are you having today?
Today, I am having myself a St. Benedict's breakfast. This is a coffee and oatmeal double. It's a Belgian-style dark ale brewed with rolled oats, dark chocolate, and fresh roasted coffee beans. Very good.
That sounds amazing. I am going to have a frostbite. It's going to be from Foothills Brewery. It is a black IPA. Let me crack this.
Crack 'em.
Yep. Let's get this going. All right. So, as we talked about, we're going to talk about cards that provide choices or player agency or choose your own adventure, if you will, right? So let's start out with a basic card, and it's going to be what I will define as an elegant card. It's beautiful.
Okay.
It's well made. It's going to be a braid. And for one colorless and one mountain, you get an instant. Choose one. A braid deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. Clean, succinct,
well-designed card.
Very nice card. Well-designed. Which is going to kind of tie into what we're going to talk about during this episode. We're going to go over a bunch of cards that are going to have they're going to have modes. And those modes, we're going to try to decide whether or not they're elegant or they're convoluted, what environments they might actually insert themselves in, or whether or not they're right for your environment. Are they power vintage? Are they thematic based? Or... well, we're going to kick them to the curb. We're going to talk about that. And one of the things we're going to use as a metric is whether or not out of those choices, let's just say there's 3 choices. Well, what if 2 of them are good for your environment and 1 is not, perhaps? What do you think about that, Stu?
Well, I think ultimately, so first of all, I will say I've sort of, this has been a bit of a theme when we've recorded a lot of episodes of this podcast, that I'm a big fan of having that choice, right? I'm a fan of cards doing multiple things and being able to be either reactive or proactive in ways that allow you to make a choice and either, deal with a problem or, take an action that might give you a little bit of a, of a boost, of a bonus. A braid, typically, obviously it's either dealing 3 damage to a creature or destroying an artifact. It's a reactive card, right? But it does give the player choices. And I do like cards that give players choices, but not all of those choices are always good choices.
Do they result in cognitive overload is the question, right? I mean, are the choices healthy for your environment?
Hard to say, because you're asking a question that is almost without a true definitive answer.
That's correct.
Right? Because you're asking, what is the competency of the play group? What are all the individual cards that are available? And we will obviously get into some of those. Do I think it's important to make sure that the experience is relatively streamlined from a design perspective? Yes, I think it's nice for things to kind of not necessarily be autonomous, but for a lot of the decisions to, make sense, to be logical, right? But I agree. I don't want it to be an overwhelming thing. I don't want you to be sitting there looking at a card thinking, man, I've got 3 choices. 2 of them might be good. 1 of them is terrible, or 2 of them are absolutely terrible, but 1 of them is quite powerful. At that point, what is your logic behind including it in the cube?
Yeah.
Right? Is there not a better single card choice that might strip some of those agency, that option away from the player or away from the drafter, but ultimately is a better choice for the cube?
And what are the odds that 4 out of 4 or 3 out of 3 are in complete alignment with your thematic build, right?
Yep, exactly.
And that, because they're not printing them, i.e. for your cube environment, they're printing them based on the set they're rolling out in.
Yep.
And we're going to kind of cover some of those cards where they necessarily don't completely align, or they're not adjacent with some of my particular cube designs and builds from 40,000 feet and what I intended for the environment to do.
Yep.
But they're still in there where I'm okay with 3 out of 4 hitting the metrics, right?
Yeah, and I think the card that you've chosen, Abrade, is such a beautiful choice to really get the conversation going, right? Players enjoy choices. Yeah, I think for the most part, people do quite enjoy having multiple options and having a card such as Abrade, right? It can take out a creature or it can destroy an artifact, 2 things that are probably pretty likely to see in a lot of cubes, right? You are trading a little bit of the flexibility that you would get in a single card to have those choices, right? So this is 2 mana. There's cards that for 1 mana will destroy an artifact, and there's cards that for 1 mana will deal 3 damage. But Lightning Bolt, as we've talked about in some of our previous episodes, cannot be an auto include in a cube, right? The same way that you wouldn't just throw a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt or something like that in a cube. Lightning Bolt might, on the surface, seem quite balanced, but I still think cards like that are really, really highly efficient could be a little problematic from time to time. So
you're willing to accept we're going to call this the combo meal, right? Like where we're going to give you the soda, the fries, and the hamburger.
Yeah.
And you think you're getting the deal because they're all together, whereas if you purchase them as individuals, they may be better. I know this is going off the rails, but you get the idea. Or if you broke it out and itemized the individuals, you said Lightning Bolt as an example. And then in this case, you could do...
Unravel the Ether.
Yes.
Oxidize.
Sure. Anything, right? And then they're not necessarily red, but you see where I'm going with this.
Sure.
Yeah. And actually, you've now combined them into one card, so you're willing to pay an additional cost to get the choices, right? The choose your own adventure. If
exactly. Now, it is obviously limited to target creature, so you can't target a planeswalker, you can't target a player. Yeah. You're trading a little bit of that flexibility, but now you've got the option to either do one of those 2 options, which is nice. Do I think it slows the game down? Was another point that we had in this one.
That's a fair point, I think, because
I don't think so. I don't necessarily think with a card like Abrade that you're slowing the card down
concise,
because it's so clean.
Move forward, there will become more difficult to navigate. Right?
And that was going to be my point.
And it's might even be slow the game down. It might be slowing down for a new player that got past a card like Cryptic Command. We'll jump ahead a little bit here, and aside from the textless version, which is insane, right?
Yes, it is.
Don't put that in your cubes, guys.
No,
but
not for new players.
If those getting passed around to someone that's never played cube before, understanding each one of those modes and how they go through their order of operations probably could be daunting to navigate for a new player. So I can see where more choices. I guess the core question of this episode is more choices better, right?
It's a great question. Right. So let me put you in a scenario, right? You've got 2 cards. One of them is Abrade. One of them is Lightning Bolt. Which one are you taking?
Lightning Bolt.
So yeah, Lightning Bolt obviously. It's a more powerful card than Abrade. It costs 1 less. It allows you to go face. You can send that 3 damage anywhere. You don't have the ability to destroy an artifact, but I'm not quite sure I'm too worried about that if I've got that flexibility with the 3 damage. So does that mean I'm willing to pay more for the option to destroy an artifact, even though I can't go 3 damage to face?
Right.
Do I want to?
It kind of creates the ability for players to make choices, right? That they want to feel that agency within the draft to make choices, and that's why they pick these critical pieces. Where would a player, and I'll ask you as the audience, if I put 2 in front of you, and let's make this a little bit more fair. Let's do lightning strike
Lightning Strike, okay.
Lightning Strike, which
Rift
would be
Bolt, maybe.
Yeah, something that would be more in alignment versus a Braid, and which one would you choose? As
Lightning Bolt versus a Braid is probably a little bit of an unfair.
It's a little bit of a reach. But
it's an unfair
but it has to ask yourself, as you're getting these passed around, do you want the versatility? You want the Swiss Army knife? Or do you want the
raw power?
Do you want the raw power? The clean, just the straight to the cut, to the point. It's going to do what it's going to do. To the face, to the player, to the creature.
Yep.
And
any target
versus this gives you the versatility of taking out multiple objects in the game.
And the effects relevant to the environment, that point I think really is probably the most important out of all of these, right? The value is nice.
Right.
Having to pay an extra mana, typically I'm not quite as worried about having to pay like maybe one extra mana unless it's a super, super high powered and, cutthroat environment. I'm probably less concerned with having to pay one extra mana for the choice. But what I want is, I want that choice to be relevant, right? I don't want as much, and this even sounds a bit, okay, a Braid is kind of a sideboard card, right? In let's say in a vintage cube environment. I would say a Braid is fairly, not that it's not main deckable, but it feels a little sideboard.
I'm going to go against you a little bit there. In a powered vintage environment, I feel like there's enough targets in there to justify going main board. But
there might be.
It's always going to be might be, right? I mean, there's no way out of that. It's going to be scenario.
I look at it from an archetype perspective. Let's say I'm drafting mono red. I want everything possible to go to the face.
Fair. That is fair.
Right?
That is fair.
So as much as, yes, it's nice to be able to destroy an artifact or trigger prowess, for example, I'm much more concerned with, I want to be able to just do as much damage as quickly as possible. And if I can't send that 3 damage to face, then that's probably going to be sideboardy for me. So, but if I go against the deck, and that deck is really, really super, super artifact focused, right? If someone's brown towning, Goblin Welder or Metal Worker, and they're trying to go crazy with artifacts, then yeah, absolutely, I could bring this card in. But maybe in a mono red deck, as an example, I'm looking for as much damage to the face as possible, right? So, but that isn't to say that the choices aren't nice. But let's say you have an artifact cube, for example. This seems absolutely perfect for a cube environment where artifacts are either the main theme or there is a pretty heavy theme without being super powerful, right? Because you've got that option to either destroy a creature or to destroy an artifact. Yes, you can't go face, but is that sort of a trade-off that you're willing to take?
It's definitely based on the scenario or the environment which it lies, right? So in my Uber Bears Artifact Cube, this card is 100% main boardable. So I see your point.
Exactly.
You're saying if you're actually trying to mono-red aggro deck, do you want to take the time off for 2 mana when you can invest that into a creature that's actually going to face? I get that point. So as we move through these different cards, we're going to be evaluating the power of the modes, and they're going to be long-winded, and we do understand that, and some of these we may shortcut through. Mm-hmm. And then one of the evaluation points is it's always a key player in making the decision whether or not a card has value or not, is whether it's instant versus sorcery, right? Speed matters with these modal cards.
Yeah.
You can have all the modes in the world, but if it's on your turn, it definitely, in my personal opinion, outside of thematic or environments that are intended to be more flatlined or slower, it definitely takes away from the power. No matter how powerful these effects are, it draws away from them. Whereas once they become instant speed and you get to react before the player passes the turn, or your opponent rather, then that actually increases the value of the card. As far as
I agree 100%. And actually, that leads really well into. So this is the first rotation of these cards, these multiple choice cards that we're going to talk about, which is the commands. Right. There's 5 of them, all 5 colors. Kayla's command in white, Urza's command in blue, Gix's command in black, Mishra's command in red, and Titania's command in green, right? So I'll look at the very first one here, which is Kayla's command. It's a 1 colorless, 2 white, and it has 4 options. Either create a 2/2 colorless construct, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, it gains double strike, search your library for a plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, or gain 2 life and scry 2. One of those I dislike because it's, for me, a reactive mode that is on a proactive card because it's a sorcery. Right. And sorcery always feels very proactive, and instant always feels very reactive to me. But the putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature I control and giving it double strike as a sorcery, that instantly turns me off a card like this, right? for me, that it is just, I understand that it's, it's in white and double strike is white and, putting a +1/+1 counter on it, fine. I like the planes. I like the gaining the 2 life and the scrying. I actually quite like the putting a 2/2 colorless construct into play. But that to me kind of takes it off. This is purely a flavor discussion, but those are the kind of things that are going to turn me off picking up a card like that.
Yeah, so I have in the Artifact Cube, whenever these came out, and I was super hype about it, I was evaluating each one of these cards, trying to figure out which one would actually make the grade in the environment. I kind of knew out the bat that most of these wouldn't make my Powered Vintage or, my Femme Fatale or my Horror Cube. Yeah. But I knew my Artifact Cube was really looking for these. And this one did not catch my eye for one reason, is that the construct in itself, it was a 2/2 colorless construct, but it wasn't going to actually get bigger based on the volume of constructs, for example, or artifacts that you had, like the other constructs.
Yes, like that was a saga construct.
And then the fact that it was a sorcery didn't draw appeal to me. And I guess the point we're making is that this card has a lot of soup on it, right? It does a lot of things. There may be an environment that's just dying to pull this into it, but out of my 6 cubes, I didn't see any worth in this one. Which leads me over to my next one here, which is Urza's Command. For 2 colorless and 2 islands, you get an instant. Keyword instant is going to be kind of the change of the game here.
Yep.
You get to choose 2 creatures you don't control, get -2, -0 until the end of the turn.
Nice reactive mode.
Yeah, it's reactive, so you actually combat trickish, sort of capture them.
Exactly.
Capture the flag. Create a tapped power token, or Power Stone token, excuse me. Create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And scry 1, then draw a card. Or it's not really and, it's or, but let's correct that. But these are a whole bunch of modes. How many do we have there, Stu? Count
4
them out.
again.
There are 4, and we can choose 2 of them. So we got a 50-50 split on this. And do you see any worth to this? Because I tried this. So I've actually added this to my Artifact Cube. And I'll just be honest with you. So aside from making the 0/0 colorless construct, and they gotcha, and then maybe reducing their cost by their power by -2, I don't see a lot of great deal of worth in that cube.
I don't hate it.
I'm not in love with it, but
I'm not in love with it. I don't hate it. I don't
test it.
I don't mind the combat trick, right? The -2, -0 could definitely be relevant. The tap Power Stone token mode, not crazy about that.
People have been hype on that for Artifact Cubes, and I'm just not seeing a lot. As a person who's running a Artifact Cube, the Power Stones, they have really no worth for me, because I already got treasures, I already got food. I mean, I'm kind of token overloaded.
It could be pretty strong in a deck like that, right? Because those are like the Urza Saga tokens where they are getting +1/+1 for each artifact.
We'll see whenever they start making more. I just haven't seen enough for it, because it actually pays for abilities, or it'll pay for artifact cards, and that's kind of their worth. But it's a little too narrow for me in that environment. I'm trying to be a little bit more robust, I guess, what I'm saying, and those are really just too tight. I can see they're cool, but that one didn't draw me in. So at the end of the day, it's a -2 for me, and it's going to be making a construct, if you will, right?
Yep.
Let's move on to the next one. Would you mind covering that one, please?
So this is Gix's Command, 3 colorless and 2 black. Again, choose 2 out of 4 modes. So you can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, or each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control.
That is an odd card.
It is an odd card.
It's attacking low and high, isn't it?
It is.
It's kind of weird. I don't know how to evaluate that card.
I actually really like it.
It's different. It's different. But for 5 mana and a sorcery really takes it back from me.
It's the most interesting out of these command cards that we've talked about, right? The white one, the blue one, and the black one so far. This one to me is the most interesting one, because being able to destroy each creature with power 2 or less is a nice choice to have. Returning creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, maybe there's some synergy there. Maybe, Anthony, you're an aristocrat guy.
These are all over the place, though. It's hard to evaluate this card. It's making my brain kind of explode, because, all these modes are going a different direction.
I think it's quite prototypical for a black card, though, right? Because the first mode is giving the +1/+1 counter, whatever, but it's giving lifelink, which is quite black, right? Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. That's a pretty, I would put that as a black power. And then return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. That is those are 3 modes right there that I would expect to see on black cards for sure.
Yeah, it's reasonable. It's literally, it feels generic black pie wheel for me right now a little bit. A little bit too generic that I'm not interested. Fair?
Sure. I don't think that's unfair at all.
There's nothing.
No, I don't think that's unfair at all.
Had it said the word instant, I'd be like, oh man, it'd been awesome. But yeah,
it could not be instant. It'd be very.
I
very
know
powerful.
it'd be really good. I would put it in my queue. All right, so the next one we have is Mishra's Command, and our good friend Christian of the show, he highlighted he likes this one, and I guess it's because of the scalability. And for 1 mountain plus X, you get a sorcery. And that's kind of going to be like, wah, wah. You get to choose two. Choose target player. That player may discard up to X cards, then draw a card for each card discarded this way. Or this spell gets X damage. This spell deals X damage to target creature. This spell deals X damage to target planeswalker. Target creature gets plus X, plus 0, and gains haste until end of turn. Oh my gosh, these things are so much fun to read. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, that cognitive overload. These cards have so many words on them.
You know what's interesting about this card to me? You could literally just pay red, that's it,
yes,
and give a creature haste.
Okay, yeah, okay, sure, whatever.
And the first mode is pretty interesting to me as well, because it's choose target player. That player may discard up to X cards.
Yeah.
And then they draw a card for each card.
It makes my brain hurt. These. So if this was an instant, I'm just going to keep coming back. If all these were instants, these would be really great.
It's nonsensical.
It's nonsensical, right?
It's a crazy card.
And then the next one's actually, this one's been getting some fanfare. People like this one. Do you mind taking on this next one, please?
Yeah, so this is Titania's Command, 4 colorless and 2 green. So this is pretty expensive. Again, 4 choices, which are exile target player's graveyard. You gain 1 life for each card exiled this way. Search your library for up to 2 land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Create 2 2/2 green bear creature tokens, or put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature you control.
Yep. So my brother and I were hanging out the other day. I'm going to give you a little stories now that we've moved through these.
Okay.
And we were talking about recently, we have a theory, a fan theory.
Okay.
That when Magic, or when Wizards of the Coast started doing evergreen terms like haste instead of this creature is no longer affected by summoning sickness.
Okay.
Or trample, creatures you control do excess damage, etc., etc. When they were sentences and they converted them to short little tiny words that are about 7 or 8 characters, they suddenly found all the space in the world in these Magic cards that they can make these super. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Now the cards are getting complex.
Yeah, they're
because
getting
we got
super
all this text
complicated.
box we
You're
got
right.
to
This is
fill.
getting insane. Like the entire, there's not even flavor text on these anymore. There's no story. We don't even know the story of these. They're just literally, boop. Here's 4 things. Read them all. Pass them around. Hope that Chuck, who just joined your Cube pod a few minutes ago, just started playing Magic yesterday, suddenly can.
You better hope he can read fast.
Yeah, because everybody else is like, and all the cards are backing up, right? We're trying to respect our lanes, trying to respect our zones as drafters, and Chuck is over here sweating. Yeah, I just, it's a lot.
This is a pretty good card, though. I mean, we
It's
talked about
powerful.
this in the pre-show, right? So, being able to search your library for up to 2 land cards, you're not restricted to basics, is pretty good.
I can see that in Lands Matters. Like, and
Absolutely.
I just so happen to support one. But for 6 mana, and this was actually mentioned just recently. I think it was done recently by a couple of shows, but at the end of the day, Primetime kind of fills this role for me, and I just don't need, in addition to more modes to do to support my Lands Matters, because there is a such thing as over supporting an archetype. We talked about this recently. We're start tilting the scales on it.
Would you put this in
so
that?
Much.
It is, but would you put that in that kind of same space as Primetime? Then you would say, right, I've got this Lands Matters package
because it does make
it's in green.
Yeah, it
gives me the same option that it does when Primetime either ETBs or attacks, that you get to go and get those 2 land cards, but you also get an additional choice.
It's Primetime-ish, because if Primetime for going for stats, you get 2/2/2s that you get to put 2/1/1 counters on them, so you make 2/4/4s, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're trying to finish out your Dark Depths combo, for example,
Right.
You could actually do that too, but it's, again, choose 2 with a lot of soup.
I agree, right? So this is something else that we talked about as far as the land matters is concerned, so that does kind of fit in with it. But I think it also fits in with the aggro strategy as well. You do get the 2/2/2 green bear creatures. You also get to put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature you control. It's pretty nice for an aggro package.
I'm going to argue aggro for 6 mana. Please explain that to me.
I don't know. Maybe it's an aggro-centric cube, and the size of the
That's fair. It's a fair point. It's a fair point. I just got to ask that question.
Like if you had mana dorks,
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And you were able to play this
Super
card on
ramp,
like
and
turn
you get
3
there
or
fast,
turn
yeah.
4, and suddenly on like turn
That is an
4 or
aggressive
5.
play. We can argue that.
It is an aggressive play.
I just heard whenever you and Justin Parnell were talking about that, and you're talking about like bringing out Emrakul at one point, and you're saying the word Emrakul a lot, and along with aggressive, I was like,
It wasn't Emrakul. It was
Emrakul.
Leatherback Bailoff.
Leatherback.
Okay,
I was scratching my head. I'm like, what is that? It's pretty sure it's mid range. You're making my head inflate. I'm like, I don't understand. All right, so the next one we're going to kind of go over. We're going to read a lot of these, and this is going to be going to the confluence section of cards. And we're going to have these included in the show notes because, as you may have noticed, that these cards are just word soup, right? And I guess it's going to be up to the curator and the drafter to decide if they want these to actually go in their environment. Not every one of these are going to have a home, but as we move through these, I'll identify which I'm running and which cubes I'm running them in. But I can see a place for every one of these, like we said before, but it's just going to be very thematic based, right? So the first one's going to be Righteous Confluence. And I'll give the mana value. It's going to be for 3 colorless and 2 planes, you get a sorcery, and it's got a whole bunch of modes on it, but the gist is going to be make some knights, you're going to exile a target enchantment, I can see some value in that, and then the final one's going to be you gain 5 life. And that kind of brings up the point where, sure, making knights is great, and they have vigilance is great, and maybe during certain corner cases, and that was something that May and I talked about recently, was about the majority case versus the corner case, that some of these cards are very board state dependent, right? They're waiting for the perfect situation to set up. So in this
like having
case,
a bunch of enchantments on the
yeah,
battlefield.
you got a reason. So out of this one, if I had to choose these, sure, I'm down to put some white knights down, basically, that have vigilance. But there has to be a target for the enchantment. And gaining
15 life, though, is not a bad thing to be able to do with one card.
Sure.
You can gain 15
for
life with one
5
card.
mana. I would rather make you lose 15 life for my 5 mana.
Can you do that with one card?
No, I can't, but I'm going to find a way. Just let me work on it. The next one we're going to go over is going to be Mystic Confluence. Stu, would you mind covering that one? Just kind of an overview.
Yeah, so this is a pretty classic power card. Mystic Confluence, 3 colorless, 2 blue. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. So you basically get Mana Leak.
Yeah.
Counter target spell unless its controller plays 3 colorless. Or return target creature to its owner's hand. Or draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
It's a very powerful card.
I actually run this in my Powered Vintage Cube. I run this in my Horror Cube. And I run this in my Artifact Cube. Because for me personally, this card feels pretty safe. As in, for 5, they get to do a lot of things, but it doesn't feel overwhelming, doesn't feel broken. It's not on the equivalent of like Mana Drain or Force of Will or anything like that. It gives them modes, but these modes all make sense. And for me personally, whereas I said this for that earlier card, but it was a Gix's card.
Gix's Commander.
We discussed that. They all felt like the thing to do if you were in those colors. This is very blue-centric, but these feel more reactive. These feel more interesting, I guess, because players want to do stuff that's more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 reactive components to this card, right?
Yeah.
The counter and the spell and return a target creature to its owner's hand.
And
feels a bit reactive.
drawing cards being a little proactive-ish, but I like this card. It does a lot. It's actually in alignment with what I like to do as a player. That's why it's in multiple of my cubes.
Agreed.
Right? The next one we have is Wretched Confluence for 3 colors and 2 swamps. You get an instant. I do like. I actually ran this for a little while. We tested this out in our Powered Vintage Cube environments. I imagine a lot of players did. And I will read this one. It was choose 3. And I do like these. By the way, we should have mentioned this before. The Confluencers are 3 versus the other ones were Modal 4.
Correct.
Right? So choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. And that's the part where it can get a little devastating. As Stu mentioned, you could gain 15 life off the Righteous Confluence, for example, to make that make sense. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Target creature gets -2/-2 until the turn. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, I like that better than Gix already.
Yes.
I do, because it's an instant.
Because it's instant speed.
It's instant, right?
So you do get a combat trick with the -2/-2.
Yeah.
Maybe you're digging for an answer, or maybe you just want to do it at the end of your opponent's turn to draw 3 cards, which is never a bad thing to do. Or you want to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That to me is a bit of gravy on this one. But overall, like the theme, I think the cost is appropriate. And again, I think the choices are nice for.
And
for
I
a
would
card
rate
like
that one as elegant. I
Yes.
just think these pieces fall together and make sense to me. Righteous Confluence, I feel like is a little convoluted. if we're kind of going through these and stepping through them. Mystic Confluence, I think, is a little elegant. If I'm going to give these a rating system that's not an A, B, C, D, E, or F, or 1 through 10, I just like the cleanliness of some of these cards versus the other ones. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that the Righteous Confluence, the Exile Target enchantment, and I hate to use the word clumsy, but maybe that's not a terrible way to describe it, right? But if the environment, if the format has a very serious enchantment, major
like
theme, sub-theme, like the Banned Enchantment Cube, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can see how a card like this could be very, very, very powerful. It's sorcery speed, but, you know, if you've got some kind of, you know,
and it gives
devastating...
you targets
exactly.
for your enchantments, for your auras, right? And we're just making a suggestion since Christian's sitting in the room right
Exactly. But I'm probably just gaining 15 life.
Yeah, I'm going to do that too. Take it. The next one's Fiery Confluence. And this one, I run this in my Powered Vintage Cube, but I did make the mistake as a curator is actually putting this in my Artifact Cube for a very short period. Just long enough for people to tell me to get it out there quickly.
Yep.
And for 2 colorless and 2 red, you get a sorcery. And I know I said sorcery's not so bad until I read the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And then taking the environment into context does matter very much with how these modes, these choices, these choose your own adventures kind of take you down the path. Mm-hmm. And choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once, as we said with the other confluences.
That's right.
Fiery Confluence deals 1 damage to each creature. Not so bad. Fiery Confluence deals 2 damage to each opponent.
Works real nice in the Two-Headed Giant.
Pretty decent, the Two-Headed Giant, but still we're not... Yeah, that actually you bring up a good point. But then it gets pretty nasty here in a Artifact Cube environment. Destroy target artifact. It takes out 3 major artifacts.
Yeah, 3 for 1 is devastating. No matter how you slice it.
Grody. But yeah, you're right. And the Two-Headed Giant's actually still gross, but reasonable.
12 damage for 1 card.
I cut it out of there too. Yeah, so I actually cut it out of multiple cubes. Now that you mentioned that, I'm going to re-edit that, remove this out of the Two-Headed Giant cube, remove this out of the Artifact cube because I made mistakes.
All right, fair enough.
I thought they belonged there. And then the next one, Stu, would you mind taking this one on?
Yeah, so this is the last one in these in the Confluence cycle. This is Verdant Confluence, 4 colorless and 2 green. Again, choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. You can either put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, or search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Not too crazy about this card, honestly, for 6 mana. Feels like...
Commander-centric, and I have a hard time running it in Commander, if I'm being honest with you.
I wouldn't run this in a Commander.
But,
it's from a Commander set, right?
It is very Commander-centric, yeah. A lot of these are actually probably work more Commander-ish, and then they're being adapted to cube environments because, curators, etc., and players have realized how powerful they are and pulled them outside of their thresholds.
Yeah. And I actually, one sort of underrated part of that is the returning target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. I actually do quite like that. I just feel like for 6 mana. I want to be doing a whole lot more.
And what's interesting about these modes, you have to do in the order in which you read them.
Yeah.
So the order of operations matters. These would be so much better if you could reconfigure the order, right?
Sure would.
Bring the creature back, play it. Oh, and then I'm going to pause on the stack together. No, none of that's happening, right?
No.
So you have to actually go through these different modes, and that's where it gets a little convoluted.
That's right.
I'm going to go with this one as convoluted, whereas Fiery Confluence, Fiery Confluence is very straightforward.
Yes, very elegant.
I'm going to give that an elegant.
Very, very elegant.
And I'm going to give Verdant Confluence a convoluted.
It's a C for clumsy again.
C for clumsy. But if you're running your environments, we do respect it. We're not trying to poo-poo here at UberCube. We're just saying, generically speaking, based on my 6 cubes, and in addition to Christian's 2 cubes, and etc., we're just trying to be mindful of how we evaluate these cards.
Yeah, and sometimes you can just evaluate it from a raw power level perspective, right?
Yeah.
Plus 2+1/+1 counters is not terrible, but things like that seem a little reactive to me. So for a 6 mana sorcery, I'm not a fan. Searching the library for a single basic land card as one of the other modes, and put it on your battlefield. If it was even put it on the battlefield untapped, then I might give it a little bit more of a pass. But again, it just feels very clumsy. And the return target permanent card. I mean, do I really want to have to pay 6 mana, even if it's to return 3 permanents? Honestly, most of the time, I'd rather just return 1
and
for
it's
2
kind
mana.
of a clunky Titania's command,
yeah,
right? They gave you a little bit more, and kind of adjacent to it, where they had the counters and go get a land versus a basic land, and you have to pay more mana for. Or actually, 6. They're actually tied, right?
They are,
but you do get to repeat which modes you want to do over and over again.
You do,
right?
and again, this comes back to the choice
at this point.
and the agency option.
It's
yeah,
dealer's choice,
exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm just never. I can't see an invite. But I don't know if I'm going to be so much of a fan of a card that costs so much for the abilities to just seem a little basic.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. So we've got some more commands. Good.
So we do.
Yeah, so you want to take on this first one?
So The next one, this is again another command cycle. White, blue, black, red, green, all the colors represented here. The first one that I'd like to cover, this is austere command. 4 colors, 2 white. I like this card. It's a sorcery speed, 1/1, but it's pretty good. You have choose 2 out of destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with mana value 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with mana value 4 or greater.
Just blow up the board, kill the world.
Just literally blow up the board. I mean, it's expensive, right?
Yeah,
You're doing this rather than spending 4 mana on Damnation or Wrath of God, but now you have some options.
It gives you options, but for 6 mana, I prefer not to have those options. I did run this in the Femme Fatale for a little bit. It's so much.
It is.
When I would rather just get a win con on board. This is not a win con. Armies aren't marching. This is just setting the board back. I love this card very much. This is like one of my EDH go-tos, right? Like I do, not to poo-poo on this card. But from a cube perspective, I just think this card does too much to set the game back, right?
Do you think it's a kind of an unfun kind of card?
It's
then,
not unfun unless you're playing to a strategy where you've intentionally drafted cards that are 3 or less, right? You've tried to get underneath that. You've got an aggro deck. For whatever reason, your aggro deck's not hitting, and you want to push this. It feels, I don't know, it just doesn't feel...
If the artifacts and the enchantments are not a major theme within the cube, then essentially could you look at this and say, I am including this because it's a 6-mana board sweeper?
No, because at the end of the day, the artifacts and the enchantments are vital. I don't want to do it. It feels hate card to me.
It is. Of course it is. It's a destruction card, right?
Yeah,
You're destroying...
But it's a mass destruction with a lot of choices, a lot of avenues. And I don't know if I want to, based on my environments, give players that many choices to disintegrate the environment. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're breaking it down. They're going to kill all the creatures. They're going to blow up all the artifacts. You're going to destroy all the enchantments.
But you're not. You're only doing 2 of them.
Sure, you got
and you
2
can't
of
even...
them.
You can either destroy all the creatures, or you can leave some creatures and destroy artifacts or enchantments.
I just feel like it's a game stall. It's just my personal opinion. I do like this card, but I feel like this is taking the game back a little bit. Stone aging the other player a little bit, or unless you're building around, this is why I think it's very commander-centric, because this is a design idea where you're going to take all your creatures and make them small enough to get underneath that umbrella so that you can play around it. Maybe you're doing a just straight-up critter deck that's nobody goes past the number 3 in their mana value, and then you're just, no enchantments, no artifacts, and you're attacking just for pure raw value. Sure. But in a cube environment, I feel like this one's it's hitting too many points on the map. It can set back a game.
Okay.
It doesn't make the armies march forward. I'm not a fan of this in cube. That's my personal opinion.
It does. And I think this is kind of speaking to the personality of the designer, if they would or would not want to have a card like this in their cube, because I do agree cards like this do represent a huge amount of hate, the ability to just wipe, I think the actual, and we'll go back to the elegant versus clumsy. I actually do think this is quite elegant, the fact that you do elegant. You do get that choice, right? Because all creatures with 3 or less, all creatures with 4 or greater means that you do have that option to just wipe the board for 6 mana. Throwing in the option to either destroy artifacts or enchantments, but now you have to make that choice. Like, are the creatures on the board that I care about or don't care about? Is it that important to the environment to have a card that gives you all those choices, right? And I actually think for 6 mana, if we're just going purely on how cool a design it is, I think the design space is really awesome.
Yeah, so this is the Bob Ross of Magic cards. I mean, it's gorgeous, right? It's painted
That's
out.
A great reference.
Right. He's made the little trees and everybody's happy. But the reality is that I just think this has too much potential in a lot of my environments to disrupt gameplay. There's a lot of options here that just going to make the game last. It makes it last.
And
longer.
I think I would go back to the first question then. If the artifacts and the enchantments are not heavily represented,
then it's a medium card.
It's best. A medium card. It is, but in a lower powered, dare I say, environment where you don't want to have the ability for people to blow up all creatures at 4 mana with a Wrath of God or a Damnation. Does the ability to destroy all creatures in, like, let's say you want to support a control shell, blue, white, mono, white, whatever the case may be, and you want to give a player the ability to be able to blow up the board, but not at the very cheap and efficient cost of 4 mana like you can with the Damnation or Wrath of God. Does this represent a very good choice?
So the reason why I don't like this card is it represents too many cards that I don't run in environments. Like it has Tranquility built into it, and it has Shatterstorm built into it.
Creeping Corrosion.
It has Citywide Bust built into it.
Right.
And there was one that killed creatures 3 or less. I can't think of the name of it right now. But this card represents like a lot of game stalls for me. And it's not letting the game move forward. Overall, Austere Command, I think, is hurting the momentum of the gameplay. I
think hate cards in general are going to do that.
It's not intended to be a hate card, but it kind of falls into that spectrum.
And I think as the designer, I think this represents a really interesting challenge. Like, do you want cards in your cube that are going to do that? And I would disagree that there's going to be like a stalemate aspect, but I definitely think that in white and or blue, right, if you want to be able to support a control shell, and you kind of have to have the ability to be able to destroy creatures en masse if you want control, right?
Agreed.
Maybe not. Maybe you don't. Maybe that statement's not completely accurate. But maybe it's a nice choice to be able to have. And maybe at 6 mana, this is an appropriate card to be able to destroy creatures again without that sort of high power level of a Wrath of God.
Yeah. So we've kind of beat this one.
We are.
But it's an interesting card to break down. So
I think it is too.
I see your points, because it kind of creates that as a curator, you have to decide what choices. Unfortunately, you have to set the adventures, the pathways, right, for your players, and they may not realize that just picture you've given them 4 or 5 choices they can make. You've laid them out as a curator, and then your players then, unbeknownst to them, right?
Yep.
They're choosing those doorways, those pathways. But if you give them something like Austere Command and you put it in the wrong environment, like the Bat Enchantments Cube, and it says destroy all enchantments, that's pretty lethal to that environment, or it's harmful, toxic even. It stops the gameplay from moving forward without actually winning the game. And that's my major concern with these type cards.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree.
And I love this card very much in Commander. One more time, Commander. But let's go over to the next one, Cryptic Command. And for 1 colorless and 3 blue, so mana intensive, but it does so much. You get an instant, you get to choose 2. You can counter target spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand, tap all creatures your opponents control, or draw a card. There are so many things on there that are so blue, and we talked about in our previous episode, we're talking about the evolution or erosion. We talked about the pillars of magic and what blue represents. This card literally just checked every
It's quintessential blue. It's one of the most representative of a single color in one card.
And frankly, I'm just going to say it, a little boring. And super mana intensive. And I do run it. Yes, I do run it. And I'm starting to doubt why I run it. Challenge me.
I don't disagree, because I don't think it's a particularly exciting card.
I think it does everything you want blue to do. But I think I don't know. This card is just really, it's the mana intensive part of it. Really,
I actually disagree. I don't think three blue pips is.
You want to
really
go long game and control long game here at this point?
It's an absolutely classic control card.
I can't disagree.
Right,
with that.
you're tapping creatures. You're countering a spell. Drawing a card is probably, of all the times that I've cast this card, I would say drawing a card has probably been used the least.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I always tap them down and I counter. A tap counter.
Tap counter is my preferred. Maybe tap and draw or
Which
counter and draw.
Which is kind of the point of the episode we talked about before. Some of these modes, it's all about player choice, but what point do you choose whether or not these are dead choices, right? How do you even track as a curator or a player which one of these 4 choose your own adventures out of the 2 that you're choosing, 50%, are even relevant to this card to basically invoke this cost?
It's
not
a
lot of cost.
As expensive as you think it is. I don't think 4 mana is particularly expensive.
Trip blue's not expensive. In a mono blue deck, sure, but it's getting long game. You start going into anything else.
I mean, I don't think so. I think first of all, it depends on your support for multiple colors. Right, this is certainly not a good stuff kind of card. Right, you really do need to be drafting like probably or 2. I don't know, 3 color maybe if you've got really good fixing and support for it, which you should have with the triomes that we've talked about on one of our previous episodes, which you obviously do run. I actually don't think 3 blue mana is particularly difficult to get.
Feels very Vidalcan Shackles to me. I'm just going to put it out there to the universe.
I hate Vidalcan Shackles.
Yeah, but it feels that way.
I hate Vidalcan Shackles,
and I love it's so much mana that it feels slow. And I do love this card, but you wouldn't get that from my tone. It's just the mana intensiveness, intensity of this card detracts from its playability, in my personal opinion.
I don't disagree, but I think if used correctly, it's a 4-mana time walk with it being able to counter a spell. Hopefully your opponent's tapping out and being able to tap all of their creatures. I think being able to time walk for 4 mana is a very, very reasonable cost, given that time walk is 2 mana and it's one of the most powerful cards ever printed. This is 4 mana. Yes, it's 3 blue, but the ability to counter a spell, tap all creatures, and not have to worry about the OP for the rest of the turn. I'm not sad about that, and I'm more than happy to spend 3 blue mana to do it.
Checkmate. I concede. Okay, I give up that one. All right, the next one is Profane Command, and we're not going to go over those texts, but the gist is for 2 swamps and X, you get a sorcery, and you get to choose 2. And I said I wasn't going to read it, but we're doing it anyways. Target player loses X life. Return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Target creature gets -X until the end of turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear. Not as relevant it used to be. Until the end of turn, they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. So my problem with this actually goes with the Mishra card too. It's the X. I'm starting, me personally as curator, I'm starting to draw back from the X card.
This is the first card that actually I might be misremembering, but I hope I'm not. This is the first card out of all the black card that does something with a creature card from a graveyard. It's the first card that puts it straight onto the battlefield instead of to the owner's hand. Let's start with that.
Out of the commands.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, it's okay. But you have to pay into it, right? It's a mana sink-ish because it's sorcery. During your turn, you're investing your resources.
I never said I liked it.
I'm not in love with it. The only thing that I can actually see, truthfully, I could see target player loses X life. Get them dead, right? You can see that, right? I wouldn't return the creature personally. And then maybe I would give creatures fear to try to end the game. Because I feel like if I'm investing the mana, this is the wrap, right? I'm going to pay into this. I'm going to pay, 2 + 5, and I'm going to try to kill you. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Hit you for 5, give 2 creatures unblockable. That's just my personal opinion on this card.
Yeah.
And that's why it's no longer well suited for my personal environments. The next one we have, and this is actually interesting. I've seen this come up a lot. Stu, would you mind covering this one?
Yeah, this is Primal Command. 3 colorless, 2 green. Again, sorcery speed, 4 choices. Choose 2. Target player gains 7 life. Pretty hefty amount of life. Put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. Target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library, or search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle.
Yeah, so I like the fact that you can go get a permanent put on top of your owner's library. I like that mode. Graveyard, I'm not high on that personally, and then I'm going to search for a creature card. So out of this, personally, there's only 2 modes that draw me in as a player. What do you think? For 5 mana.
Searching your library for a creature card and then putting it in your hand
is reasonable
nice.
For 5.
That's nice, but it's extremely expensive.
You can't cast it.
You can't cast it anymore.
Now you spent 5 mana.
No, and it's at sorcery speed.
Yes.
Target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library at 5 mana.
It's medium.
It's like, I don't like that. Don't like that at all.
No. So,
put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. Kind of expensive. 5 mana for that. Yeah. Not terrible. Not great. Not really a big fan of that. Target player gains 7 life. Again, to me, gain life effects are a little underwhelming. I know we talked about the gain 15 life on one card. I don't know. I'm just not crazy about this card at all.
Yeah, so I would say that for 5 mana, grand total, right?
Clumsy.
You got... Yeah, this is
not elegant.
It's not elegant because you're going to get 2 pieces of this that I personally would use as a curator, and that would be the search my library and maybe put a target non-creature. That's it, right? Otherwise, these modes have nothing to do with anything that I'm going to do within my 6 environment.
Sure.
So I guess it's dealer's choice again as to what environment and what you're hosting within said environment.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I'm giving this was clumsy. It's clunky. All right, the next one we have is Incendiary Command. And I actually kind of like this one, but I don't run it. And for 3 colorless and 2 mountains, you get a sorcery. Again, sorcery being the thing that detracts from it immediately within my mind.
Yep.
But we're going to move through it. Incendiary Command deals 4 damage to target player, or Incendiary Command deals 2 damage to each creature, or destroy target non-basic land, or each player discards all the cards in their hand, then draws that many cards. For 5 mana, the only catch for me in that entire thing was the discard and drawing cards. The wheelish rummaging effect.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm not in love with this card at all. It's just too much for any kind of pyroclasm type effect. It's trying to take too many ideas and put them into one card. I don't see any value in my personal environment.
I actually think if you've got like, again, I'll talk about the mono red like burn kind of deck. Yes, it's 5 mana, which is expensive, but 4 damage to target player is not to be scoffed at. And if you've, been able to dump your hand and you've drawn a bunch of like lands, for example, and you just want to be able to dump 3 lands out of your hand, or 2 lands even, and be able to get a couple of, spells off the top that can end the game, I actually really don't dislike this card.
I don't hate it. I think you can line those up just right. I get what you're saying. Hit them for 4 and then dump them out and try to hit them some more. I get it.
And I think it represents...
Big red decks, right?
Yeah, I think it represents red really, really well, right? 4 damage to the face, very red. 2 damage to each creature, obviously. Destroy target non-basic land, 100%. And like you say, it's got that quasi kind of wheel effect with discarding all the cards in your hand, then drawing that many cards. I really don't dislike this card at all. I think, if I was looking at some kind of, dare I say it, like a finisher for burn, or sort of a top end for burn, that I wanted to be able to, dump a couple of crappy cards out of my hand, deal some damage to the face, maybe even handle a creature situation, like some token deck that's, some nonsense going over the, on the other side of the board. I don't hate it.
I'd rather just run Char and just take some damage to my face, hit them to the face, and be done with it. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. But there's only one Char.
Yeah, that's fair.
And there's an incendiary command.
It has options. I can see this for certain curators falling into the realm or the spectrum, but I just don't think this is. I think this is, again, I'm going to give this. If we're doing an A through, we'll give this a B. It's clunky-ish. I'll let it go. I'll let you have it.
I think B is a fair.
I think B is fair. I don't think it's an A+, but I think it's a B.
It's definitely not A+.
Yeah, so let's move over to the next subgroup here. So we have some more commands, and we're going to kind of... These commands are so long-winded. And I guess that's the point of this episode, is to talk about the... These are just so...
There's
taxing.
So much work.
They're so taxing. Imagine you're passing these around the table and people are reading them. And as we've pushed through this episode, we're trying to read these things.
These are not the
struggle.
Yeah, these are not the cards. If you're just like, look, guys, we've got 1 hour before we've got to go and catch the bus. Let's get a quick draft in. These are not the kind of cards, I think, unless everyone's super familiar with them, to have in the cube that you want to try and draft quickly, because there's a lot of word soup and a lot of text on them.
Yeah, so in the sense of what he just said, instead of reading every single line of text and trying to break these down, as much as I want to, that'd be a 2-hour-long episode, right?
It's hard when we're recording this podcast. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot of
I'd like to sit
reading.
around and just chat about this. We can have some beers. We can talk about these cards. But
That's right.
Lorehold's Command is one that I kind of move past. I'm going to skip right over that. It'll be in the show notes. But the one that I am running in my Powered Vintage environment is going to be Prismari Command. And for 1 colorless and 1 blue and 1 red, you get an instant. Keyword instant.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
That's right.
And you get choose 2. Prismari Command deals 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards, or target player creates a treasure token or destroy a target artifact. Out of all of those, making a treasure token is probably the least valuable, but you have 3 viable modes there that actually move the game forward. That gives this enough appeal that you can support Reanimator, aggro strategies. It hits it's anti-artifact, I guess if you will, in a powered vintage environment or an unpowered environment. This card is just really powerful. And I run this because of the particular art in my La Femme Fatale, because it's just beautiful.
Yeah, very cyberpunky.
It's just straight and to the point. This card's beautiful. I call it elegant. Where's Lorehold Command? If you notice, we just skipped over that like a speed bump. There's a lot of words going on there, and I'm just not going to do that today. Whereas Quandrix Command does represent something to me. I just recently made a cut in my, based on our CubeCon experience, I had Trigon Predator in there, which I do love that card. But Quandrix Command I've put into that Simic slot because it fills more of the role that I want in the Artifact Cube environment without being completely repeatable.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what was noted, is it was overly repeatable.
I love repeatable effects if I'm playing an EDH game and you can control.
So
yeah, but in a cube, I feel that repeatable effects like that, especially when it's just so it hates on so much of that cube.
Anything repeatable becomes a problem in a cube environment. If the other player across the table doesn't get an answer, then they can't solve the equation. Whereas in a multiplayer environment, other players are trying to help you solve it.
I
So
agree.
something like Trigon Predator, not so threatening in Commander, may get a few soul rings around the table, may piss a few people off. But the reality is, if you let it go too loose, Trigon Predator in an artifact cube environment, keep really just breaking down the pieces. Whereas Quandrix command from one colorless, one colorless and Simic, you get an instant. Choose to return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Planeswalker not being relevant in that environment, but
Right.
anywho, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Pretty good. It's kind of reactive. Gets in there, right? And then put 2/1 counters on target creature. Kind of helps the aggression
Nice
of
little
the
combat
idea,
trick.
right? Nice combat trick. And then player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library. I thought it would be better just to have another counter spell type anti-artifact enchantment. And it just does a lot more options. It may not be the perfect fit, but I felt like Trigon Predator was a little bit toxic to the environment in Uber Bear's Artifact Cube, but was repetitively just taking down the pieces.
Agreed.
And
I think this is a really elegant card as well. Really nice
I think
design.
it does a lot.
Fits
It's very
Simic real beautifully.
Very Simic, but Quandrix, it's very Quandrix.
Quandrix.
Quandrix, not Simic. Okay. All right, the next one is...
So the next one is Silver Quill
And we're going to skip over that one because it's not so great. And then we're going to move over to Witherbroom Command because it's terrible.
So I will agree. I didn't want to go through Silver Quill Command. So thank you for not asking me to read through that.
It's just a lot.
Witherbloom Command is a cool card, right? So this is 1 black, 1 green. Sorcery, 1/1, but choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards, and then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Not bad. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Pretty good.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, I like that too. Target creature gets -3/-1 until end of turn, or target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life.
So I run like, Pernicious Deed and Abrupt Decay and my powered vintage environments, but I actually kind of want to experiment with this card. I think Chill MTG was kind of high on this card. I think he talked about it multiple times.
I'm high on it because I like that -3/-1. Again, it's not great at sorcery speed. I don't like that much that as a combat trick, right? But I like the mill 3 cards and return a land, and I like the destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, whatever. Those last 2 modes I'm not crazy about, but those first 2 modes for 1 black and 1 green I think are elegant. I think they work nicely for the colours.
Yeah, so it's the cost of 2 that makes the choices
Precisely.
of 2 because you're only choosing the 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I see what's happening here.
Exactly.
All right, let's move over to the next section. I think that's a pretty sweet card. So kind of getting into some commands again. We kind of bounce back and forth, right? So these commands, we're going to kind of jump through them.
I like these because the mana values are all over the show.
They're...
It's like, this isn't like a 4/5 cycle. This is like 2, 4, 5, 3, like...
So
someone was drinking when they were designing
these are based on Takir, right?
Yes.
These are different dragons and their modes. So we're gonna talk about these. It's gonna be a Tarka's command and Silumgar's command and Ojutai's command and Kolagon's command and Dramoka's command. But as we break these down, there's so many words. And a lot of these, in my personal opinion, they will find their environments, right? They will find their cube environments that will fit them best.
I think that's a great point that you just made right there, right? Is that some of these cycles... and I think it's obviously all of these are very design dependent, right?
Yeah.
And we can argue like that Anthony doesn't like X card because he feels that it's toxic, or I like a particular card. But I really do feel of all the cycles, they really do seem like there's just a fit there, right? In the cube. These to me are they're on flavor. I think they're designed well. I think they give good choices. Not overwhelming choices, not choices that I'm like, do I really want to give my a player the ability to counter a spell or give a creature -3/-3 or something like that? No, I like these choices. They're elegant. They're well designed. I think they can fit in a fairly they're ubiquitous among across a lot of cube environments. They're not super specific. And like I said, I just think they're designed well.
Yeah, I think they actually fit within their color spectrums too. For instance, Kolagon's command being a Rakdos card. I mean, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Target player discards a card. Destroy target artifact. Kolagon's command deals 2 damage to any target.
It's such a well-designed card.
All that's done for 1 colorless, 1 swamp, and 1 mountain.
Yeah. Very, very powerful.
It's a beautiful card. But out of that entire command cycle, personally, I haven't found a home for any of these. But what I do like is when I'm flipping through my binders, these have so much versatility that, in my mind, align with the groups. I know they call them Atarkas and Silumagars, whatever. But I see this as Azorius and Dimir and Rakdos because they kind of play to that idea of the guilds. And they do it so well. I think each one of these have a home.
Are you really not running any of these in any of your cubes?
I'm running Kolagons at best.
Okay.
I could see maybe Dramokas being in Christian's Bant Enchantment cube because it has target player exiles and enchantment. And I could see Silumagars, even though it's 5, it actually does -3/-3, it destroys a planeswalker, and it actually does a lot. Have you read this card? Read this card. This card's amazing.
Yes, I have. Silumgar's command, 3 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black. Instant, choose 2. Counter target non-creature spell. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Permanent.
Yeah.
Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. Destroy target planeswalker. Now, destroy target planeswalker. Not everybody's a big fan of planeswalkers. No. In fact, there's plenty of people out there who really despise planeswalkers.
Who don't like them the most? Silumgar.
Silumgar probably doesn't, as it's literally written on his. I don't even know what that is. Anyway, art is absolutely crazy. But Silumgar doesn't like him yet because it's destroyed. But again, going back, the design space, -3/-3, good spot.
I think it's a great
counter
card.
target non-creature spell. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. This is like, hey, could be a 5-mana Time Walk, question mark?
It's pretty decent. So what I like about this big card, aside from the fact that it costs 5, right? It's a billion mana.
It's expensive.
But it's so does Mystic Confluence, and it does a lot of things.
It does.
Even though it does cost a mirror, and that cost, and we're going to call it Silumagar's cost, it has a lot of potential to go into a lot of cubes. Just not in the highest power, in my personal opinion, but it just gives you so much flexibility. I think I love this one the most. Now, I do love Kolaghan's Command. I realize that's an exceptionally powerful card. But Silumagar's Command, I love everything about this card except for the cost.
Here's an interesting... I agree, and here's a question I'm going to have, right? And I'll go back to Silumgar's Command because it's good for this. So, destroy target planeswalker. How much support for planeswalkers are you going to want to have in your cube to include a card specifically like this, right? Or let's say, for example, your cube has got 1 or maybe 2 planeswalkers, or heck, even if it's got no planeswalkers. Would you look at a card like this and say, you know what, countering a target non-creature spell, and having the option to return a target permanent to its owner's hand, and having the ability to give a target creature -3/-3, right? Those are 3 really nice choices, even at 5 mana, even if you just ignore the last one. But you can't, because that destroy target planeswalker is on the card. As a curator, would this be a element of this card that you would say, you know what, because I have no planeswalker support in my cube, would that be a card that you would look at and say, you know what, I really don't want to include a card, even though I like the other modes, because it has that destroy target planeswalker, and I don't have much, if any, planeswalker support for my cube? Like, how much does that enter your line of thinking when you're looking at cards like this?
It does. Actually, I look at a lot of cards. It might say exile target creature or exile target planeswalker, for example.
Which is different, right? Because they should have creatures. But this is very specific to planeswalkers.
But yeah, it's very specific. But like, if I had to choose those modes and I didn't have planeswalkers inside the mode, right? And I had to remove it, do I want to pay 4 mana to exile target creatures? How I ask myself. So the way I would evaluate this card is out of the choose 2, do I want to get 66% of the possible variations that I could choose from the card, removing the planeswalker one?
Of course.
Right. And is that viable? So do I want to pay 5 to counter target non-creature spell and bounce a creature?
It's not bad.
Counter bounce.
It's not bad at all.
Counter bounce-ish. Or do I want to remove a creature and bounce a creature-ish? But I have to do them in the layers that matter within the card too. To answer your question, I think the 5 mana, it's almost necessary to have the planeswalkers, because I think the first 3, they're great. But to pay 5, I would only want to run this in this, I don't want to use the word slowest, but the flattest environments. There's no good connotation I can put here.
And would you have it
speed-wise?
Yeah, and I'm saying, would you want to have, or would you need to have planeswalker support in the cube in order to have a card like this specifically has that mode?
It just depends on what how quick your environment is. I mean, what are you looking at for aggro package? Like, what's the pacing and tone of your cube?
Sure.
And then if 5 mana is not a scary number and you're shooting for, I don't know, you're apexing at the number 9, then sure. But if you're critical massing at the number 4 and 5, then this card becomes a real problem even without Planeswalkers.
For me, I would have.
tempo.
I agree. For me, I would have a bit of a problem. I don't know if I could include a card like this.
Thematically, I don't mind omitting a line if that's what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking.
So it does look. It's an eyesore. It is an eyesore.
Exactly.
It is an eyesore, and I do catch myself doing that a lot, like with my thematic cubes, where they'll have a certain line of text, and I'm like, that doesn't apply to the cube at all. Specifically, the word Planeswalkers, and specifically
that's why I brought this card up.
Specifically within my artifact cube, because that's the only one I don't run Planeswalkers in. So I catch myself. Like, do I want to put this in? Do I want this removal spell that's really efficient, but then it says creature and Planeswalker? Is that going to confuse or cause some kind of signpost for players that they're looking for a Duretti, for example? It's not there.
That's a great point. It's not just about the theme, but how much do you think cards like this can potentially send a bad signal for when someone's drafting, right? Because if I see this card and I'm like, oh, there's a card in here in this cube that has a choice. It's not destroy target creature or Planeswalker. It is specifically destroy target Planeswalker. Do you think that cards like this can potentially send a message that you don't want to send to your drafters when you have a card that specifically mentions, that has a mode like this, that is specifically only for Planeswalker and there's no support?
I have a fix. It's called a Sharpie. Just draw a line right through destroy target Planeswalker. Because, I mean, it's kind of like either you put it in there or you don't. There's no revolving door here. It's curator choice.
Of course it is.
I choose not to for the aesthetics.
But then would you, in that case, then say, okay, I'm just going to look for a card that maybe isn't quite as flexible, like...
I do, in fact. I don't have a right in front of you.
Cryptic Command.
Cryptic Command.
Counter a spell and bounce a permanent.
That's trip blue, though. It's not as flexible.
Yeah, but it's one less color. It's one less CMC.
It's mono blue.
Exactly.
I don't know if I agree on its path. I'll follow you down here.
All right, fine.
All right. We've got a couple of honorable mentions, and it's only because I have this total, fascination with squirrels. Verdict Command. For 1 colorless and 1 green, you get an instant. Choose 2. Target player creates 2 tapped 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Counter target loyalty ability of a Planeswalker. Exile target card from a graveyard, or target player gains 3 life. The only reason why I even run this card in my 2-headed giant cube is because it makes squirrels. None of these other modes really have any. I don't know why I run this card. I'm just saying, it just makes squirrels. And
it's extremely linear.
It's super linear.
Target player creates 2 tapped 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, right? Yeah. Oath of Druids deck, end of your turn. I'll give you 2 creatures. Go into my Oath of Druids, trigger. Go get myself an Emrakul.
You should have told Chill that when he was trying to do that to us.
It's pretty linear, but you can see how it might counter target loyalty ability of a Planeswalker. Man, for 2 mana, I get to prevent your Khan ultimate or something like. It's incredibly linear. It's clunky, but exile target card from a graveyard. Hello, 2 mana. I get to screw up your reanimate plans. Not bad.
It's very narrow. This card.
That's what I started with.
It's linear. It's narrow. I run it. I admit this is a clunky card. You know what? I just got totally hung up in the squirrels.
If you had a mono green deck and you were facing off against a reanimate deck and you were on the play,
my squirrels
would you put this in?
No.
If you wouldn't?
Maybe.
If you had literally no other reanimate hate.
I don't know why I run this card.
If you were playing any Oath of Druids deck, like literally any Oath of Druids deck, why wouldn't you run this card?
I just have a fascination with
you can't play around this,
There's
right?
No way
Other
around.
than counter magic.
There's no way out of this conversation.
No, there's no...
All right, let's move it on to the next card. Stu, cover this one.
So this one is Sublime Epiphany. This is 4 colorless and 2 blue for a blue instant. Choose 1 or more counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, or target player draws a card.
There are so many modes in this card. It's beautiful.
First of all, this isn't choose 1. This isn't choose 2. This is choose 1 or more. This is literally, there are 5 options, and you get to choose all of them. Like this is like a dollar menu right here, right? And I'm pretty simple at the dollar menu. I'm like, give me a medium fry and a double cheeseburger. I like having the options, right? So having 5 that you can just say, I want all 5 of these, right? You're literally never ever going to have all 5 of these.
No, it's impossible. What's the statistical averages of you actually countering a spell and countering a targeted ability?
It's pretty slim.
It's pretty slim.
It's pretty slim. But
so we're gonna go ahead and shred this down to.
But either countering a spell or an activated or triggered ability.
I mean,
that's
fancy.
basically
It's
how
fancy.
I read this card.
It's fancy,
right? Which is not terrible. Return target non-permanent to bounce, not bad. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. That's pretty nice.
And then because the only first one's the aura, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then draw a card.
Sure. I mean, I run this in my Femme Fatale cube.
It's 6 mana.
It's a nice closer.
It is really expensive.
It's really beautiful. I love the
expensive.
The art is gorgeous. I don't know if it wins games, but I just think this art is fantastic.
Why are we talking about this card then?
Because I put it in the list. That's why we talk about it.
But why are we talking about this card?
I don't know.
It's here.
It's here. I put it on the list. That's what I did. It was honorable mentions, my dude. Honorable mentions.
It is an honorable mention.
All right, so let's move on to the final thoughts. So, simplistic design versus complex design. As you've seen, this has been a real struggle to read through some of these cards. You have to think about the mental taxing of both your players and your drafters while just moving through these cubes. Right?
I think the difficulty.
These cards.
I would agree. I think the difficulty of this may be just purely from a card complexity perspective. This might be the most difficult recording that we've ever recorded because there's just so much word soup and so much stuff that I have to read on these cards. And some of these cards I'm very familiar with. Kolaghan's Command, Cryptic Command, very familiar with these cards. But there's just so much going on that you can see how this can very quickly turn even not just a draft, even a hand. Turn a hand from like, ooh, I've got some cards that like a creature I just cast or a counter spell, and now all of a sudden I've got 5 things on this one card. Could be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I'll give you a little anecdote here. So a long time ago, I had this great idea to build me a charm. I was gonna build a charm deck.
I was building a charm deck
for Commander.
And
I put all these cards in my hand.
And I put these cards in my hand.
And then I realized I had to read all these cards.
That's it. No more Dumb.
And it was so many cards. I would like have 5 charms in my hand. I'm like, and I was just like completely locked. Like, I think I have a response. Hey, hold, please. Hold. Like, can I put you on hold, please?
Get the music playing. I got to read my flavor text.
Anyway, so yeah, I have a response. Yeah, it was awful. So there's a point where you can actually get too much. I think Choose Your Own Adventure has so much purpose and utilitarianism until it becomes a detriment. Like if you ran too many cards that gave too many choices, when have you created an environment that's now becoming chaotic? How many paths can you offer players?
I would agree, and I think the sort of if I was to pick 3 cards out of all the ones that we chose, that I would say I would never fault someone for including that, and maybe saying I would never fault it sounds immediately very negative, and I hate to use terms like that. But let's go all the way back to a Braid, right? Literally just 2 choices, deal 3 damage to a creature or destroy an artifact. Elegant, very simple, very straightforward, very easy choice to make in the middle of the game, right? Cryptic Command. Cryptic Command, even though it's 3 blue, I'll tap your creatures and I'll counter that spell. Or I'll tap your creatures pre-combat if I'm about to take lethal, and I'll draw a card and look for a way to win. Kolaghan's Command. Elegant choices, nothing too complex when it comes to just reading the card and keeping the game flowing, right? But there's so many of these cards that just, for me, I don't know if it's not just from a design perspective, I don't know if I even want to play them. I don't want to have to look at a card and think, I want to make, the correct choice out of the 5 options or 6 options that I have on this card. I would rather just include a card that just does the one thing that's, and maybe this is a bit of a design thing. When you're looking at these modal cards, right? When you're looking at these 4 and 5 option cards, are you looking at them as I want to give my players and my drafters the choices that these cards represent? Or I just maybe thought that they had one effect that I like and I'm just including it because it has a bunch of other stuff tacked onto it?
That's a good question, actually. So I would say, as we start to close down, is that it's kind of a broad-based answer. So using Urza's command, the Power Stone I'm not so personally interested in, but I'm more interested in the construct that it's going to make. I'm more interested in the -2 to the attacking that it's going to make. But that's my personal decisions. I want to see players have a toolbox available to them, but I don't want to give them so many that it starts becoming it's not tangible anymore to what I'm trying to explain with the cube environment. I don't want to take my environment and just give so many people choices they don't even know what the story I'm even trying to tell anymore.
Does it become more kind of good stuffy?
It becomes good stuffy. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. There's a point where utility can take away from the theme.
Yeah.
Now I get it in the highest power environments. Whatever.
There's no space for those 5 and 6 and 7 mana sorceries that
they're
don't do a whole lot.
They're going to get caught anyways, right?
Yeah.
Unless they do the most powerful things. But when you start getting into the thematic builds, where you're trying to tell a story, like the femme fatale or the
artifact two-headed giant,
or the horror, or the
horror. Yep.
Yeah, I've got to really evaluate them on a different level, and then I have to see if each one of these modes. Sure, I'm going to let you choose your adventures, but are the adventures healthy, or do they enrich my environment, and are they elegant or convoluted? And then I'm going to ask the audience, and we'll put a poll out there, which of these do you run in your environments, right? I want to know what people run in their environments.
Yep.
Specifically in thematic environments, you start getting into these interesting cubes. What choices do you make, and how do you evaluate these cards? And do you base it on if it has... Do you take it for the 100% of what it matches to your environment, or are you looking for, it gets 3 out of 4, right?
Yeah.
And is that good enough to go into your environment?
Exactly.
I'm curious to hear what the community has to say about that. Other than that, we're going to move over to the socials.
So, as always, if you love the show, we would really, truly appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite player. It really helps us with the exposure and get us out to more of the Cube community. You can find us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. If you'd like to reach out to us via email, you can find us at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. And as always, you can check us out on the socials for the link to a Discord. We've always got some great conversation going there with some very popular and very talented cube curators. We'd love to have you guys stop by and hang out and give us some feedback on the show, or ask for some feedback on your cube. We got some guys. I think Anthony has a couple of cubes. He might know what he's talking about.
I might have a couple.
Anthony, tell us a bit about the Patreon. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so we got a pretty sweet Patreon set up, so you can actually go through there, and it's to basically to help keep the lights on here at UberCube. For being honest, it's to help.
They're dimming. The lights are dimming.
They are dimming.
There's only one bulb left in our recording studio right now. I can't afford any more.
But it's so that we can actually add. We're working on some ideas for the community, and we have that landed out. And I'm also, like I said before, I am in fact working on merch. That is a struggle, but I am in fact working on it. It is in progress. Loading, buffering, but we are getting there soon. Other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube, and is Happy Cubing!